Hey, what's up guys? Kevin Cage here with another crypto update. Hope everyone's doing well. In this video, we're just going to do a quick rant over my thoughts of the Bitcoin price chart and the cycles. I do believe Bitcoin creates another all-time high price in the future. I'm not somebody that thinks Bitcoin has to go to $1 million by any means, but for Bitcoin to even break past that previous high at 69K, go to 70, 80, even 100K plus is possible. Last cycle, Bitcoin is at a 1.2, almost $1.3 trillion market cap. At just over 100,000, that would be a $2 trillion market cap. There's always fear in markets, and anything is possible in crypto. It is one of the most volatile asset classes in the world. But with these setups of tokenization, if you guys caught the last video, it is super important and answers so many questions. And some global black swans or geopolitical concerns can also act as even a positive catalyst for crypto. Whether the Dow Jones, S&P 500, or NASDAQ do a blow off top into a massive crash, or even just see a 30% or 40% crash, or other precious metals like gold getting very close to their all-time high price, or growing fears about inflation and the strength of the US dollar and other investors just looking for risk on assets. Of course, a variety of Bitcoin spot ETFs and all of the AUM under those institutions that are applying for those spot ETFs is over 17 trillion. And even if it takes a while and they only allocate 1 or even 2% of that net worth into Bitcoin, that is a couple $100 billion in buy pressure. And we've already seen 3 very significant bull runs in the crypto asset class. And I'm not saying there's going to be 5 or 10 massive life-changing bull runs to come, but I strongly believe that this decade we have 1, even 2 massive bull runs left to surpass our previous high at 3 trillion. We know the Swift estimates for tokenization by 2027. We know BCG's tokenization estimates by 2030. We know the goal of 10% of global GDP being tokenized by 2030. Even if this is 5 to 9%, that is trillions of dollars. Digitalization is growing and cross-border payments are expected to reach 250 trillion by 2027. All of these global banks and custodians have trillions of dollars in AUM, and all of them are creating crypto trading desks, if not buying them. And when we take a look at the crypto asset class versus other asset classes, some of which are valued at over $100 trillion, like equities, bonds, and real estate, and even private equity and alternative investments are projected to grow to a couple dozen trillion. Maybe I'm crazy and I have confirmation bias because I hold crypto, but just following the developments, it's hard for me to imagine that the crypto asset class does not surpass another high at 3 trillion, even getting to 5 trillion or $10 trillion plus over the coming decade. So first up, looking at the Bitcoin monthly price chart, if I didn't believe Bitcoin would create another all-time high price, at the very least, I wouldn't be in crypto this early pre-regulation. When we're looking at dozens, even hundreds of alts, a variety are sitting at all-time lows, some are up a bit, but for the most part, during a bull run, when Bitcoin creates an all-time high price, whether that's 70K, whether that's 100K plus, a lot of these alts will recover. In my expectations, whenever Bitcoin creates a new all-time high price would be watching the previous cycles when the monthly RSI was in overbought territory. So we had the monthly RSI at highs here at the Bitcoin high, right there, Bitcoin high, and then the last cycle at the first Bitcoin high before bearish divergence. So zooming in, and whether you think we're bearish and we do another crash, whether you think we just get a mere retracement or actually are en route to an all-time high price. Per history, every single time the monthly pierces 70 into overbought, we go into an all-time high price. Even this last peak right here, where Bitcoin actually created an all-time high price with bearish divergence, we still crossed just over 70. So we'll definitely see a lot more of the traditional finance guys return to the market again, playing the market cycles just like we've had 3 market cycles over the past 10 years. And just like Credible Crypto shared on Twitter, we can see the weekly RSI is right around 70 today. If we can pierce through and create another high, Bitcoin can definitely run up even this year. Just like in the previous cycle where we pierced right here the weekly RSI into overbought going well above 70 and we had a nice run. Now since Bitcoin's all-time high price, it has been over 700 days. Since the first high where a lot of the oscillators, the MACD, the RSI were at the highest level, we can see this has been over 900 days. If we followed and measured 1,000, 1,100 days from either the first high or the second high, this still happens in 2024 if we were to follow. And as I've said before, bear markets are the perfect recipe of time just taking forever, either prices crashing or a trendless market, lack of liquidity, and it really just works our psychology and our emotional expectations. But even looking at Bitcoin's price today and just going to the all-time high price, that's just about a 100% move or a 2x return. And throughout all of spring and summer, I thought at the very least during the uptrend for the Bitcoin price chart, we're going to go to 35, even 42,000. I was expecting Bitcoin to continue its retracement rather than getting stuck in this 200 plus day range. And with that bigger retracement, I was expecting a lot of alts at the lows to recover a bit and hit some previous gaps and imbalances above. Now, without even talking about an all-time high price for Bitcoin and just talking about structures like we've seen for the last 3 cycles over the past 10 years, although I would love nothing more for Bitcoin to reach an all-time high price, and it is getting a lot more likely as these oscillators turn up. If we follow what the last 3 full cycles for Bitcoin have done, we still reach that weekly R1 in between 39 to 42K. And what's interesting is when we're at 15K, 20K, 25K, a lot of people think we're going to go sideways and we're not going to create a new all-time high price until well after the halving in 2025. From my looks, that is one of the worst case scenarios and delays everything. I think it's still possible to create a high going into the halving and then have a big crash. There are just way too many confluences on the Bitcoin price chart. Even if I'm down in some positions, I'm not selling my alts because the probability that Bitcoin goes to 40K plus in the future, if not even an all-time high price, is there. So looking at the past 10 years and looking at 1, 2, and 3 different bull runs and full cycles. For me, not financial advice, I believe the crypto asset class far exceeds its previous all-time high market cap in the years ahead with tokenization, with custody, digital asset infrastructure, and DeFi. I think Bitcoin creates an all-time high price. If I wanted to be super conservative, I still believe Bitcoin reaches 40, 50K. So why would I sell any of my holdings in legitimate projects when markets are still dry and the volume could come in the future? And then as Bitcoin is going to a high, that's when we see alts absolutely rocket. Even high caps like XLM did about a 29x from its cycle low. So for me, whether Bitcoin's at 10K, whether it's at 30K, I'm just not interested in selling my alts in any positions that are down. I'm just going to be waiting for retracement in fundamentally strong projects that I see building. In looking at Bitcoin structure, comparing it to previous cycles, it's not different in terms of any type of length. The oscillators are in similar positions. We're still seeing signs of life, although it's not a big retracement like the previous cycle, it's a lot more similar to back here. And a lot of new investors come into this market buying meme coins or even other L1 projects, and they're wondering, why do we care so much about what Bitcoin does? Because Bitcoin is the king of this market, whether we like it or not, whether you have a large amount of holdings in it or not, it is the most liquid and it was the #1 asset that gave birth to this asset class. Now, the reason that we care is because the altcoin market is coupled to Bitcoin. So the better Bitcoin does, the better altcoins do. And then we can ask ourselves, well, if any of these utility projects are actually successful in the future, could they decouple from Bitcoin and actually go up even if Bitcoin's going down? And in theory, yes. But we have to remember, we are still coupled to Bitcoin whether we like it or not, and in the future when regulation is in place and can actually open up the floodgates to allow applications to be used by enterprises and all these technologies to be used at scale, then we can talk about decoupling. So I know Fetch, Render, a variety of projects have started doing that retracement, whether it was a 5x from the low or 10x, so there are exceptions. But the majority of projects, for the greatest returns that we can get in them, only happen as Bitcoin is going into an all-time high price. So is it possible for an alt to absolutely take off, get some great news, and reach an all-time high price? Yes. And I would love that, but history has shown us the majority of the time, almost 99% of the time, we have to wait for Bitcoin to reach much higher prices. And better late than never, we did close the CME gap, I'll show you that really quick, and then the open fair value gap is starting to be tested. So here's the Bitcoin CME gap around 35,000, and that recent wick did just go just above, so we did 100% close this gap. Now the highest open weekly fair value gap we have for Bitcoin is right around 60,000, between 59K to 62K. I would love nothing more for Bitcoin to hit an all-time high price within the next 12 months. And I think gaps, CME gaps, liquidity gaps, fair value gaps, and different types of imbalances, they're always important to consider, but it should not be the only consideration we make, it's just another confluence. Below on the CME price chart, this is the Bitstamp chart, we do have that open CME gap still open around 20K, we also have an open weekly Bittrex gap around 23,000. So here's the actual CME gap, and the ticker on TradingView to see it yourselves for the Bitcoin CME futures is BTC1! Gaps are interesting. We had this one open, we came back and closed this previous gap, but remember, we still created all-time high prices for Bitcoin with open gaps still to this day around 11,000, even 9,800. So for me, these gaps are important to consider when you're doing your analysis, but it shouldn't be the only consideration. I like Steve's analysis with the 5.3 calculation he shared last year for the Crypto Crew University, and it is interesting because it's happened 3 times in a row, and it's very, very accurate in terms of mapping out that high for Bitcoin. And assuming that this was our cycle low at 15,500, that math is showing about a $79,000 or even $80,000 Bitcoin. Last cycle Bitcoin came all the way up here to the 3618, even a little higher. And as Bitcoin's approaching and getting into that all-time high price territory, that's when we can see those exciting moves for the altcoin market, and that is what we call alt season. I don't think Bitcoin goes to the 3618 again anytime soon. That would be over $200,000. For me, it's a lot more realistic to be between maybe 80,000 to 120,000 between these extensions, the 127, 1618, and the 2 extension. So we have the Bitcoin halving here, and I'm not a big believer that we have to wait well after the halving for any crazy moves in the market. I think it's just another confluence when you're considering cyclical analysis. So here's what I want to happen, and here's what I don't want to happen. I want to see Bitcoin climb to an all-time high price. I don't want to reject that 48 or 52K level and going all the way back down to 20K. I want to see a break into an all-time high. And then during the bear market or another black swan, it is possible to come all the way back down from a new Bitcoin all-time high price to sweep that liquidity and open gaps down around 20K. So going into 2024, I want to see Bitcoin keep climbing. I don't want to reject that 48 or 52K level going all the way back down, because that would just be a nice retracement, definitely a bullish impulse from 15,500, but I want to see a new all-time high price because that is the best case for altcoins. And Bitcoin going to an all-time high price, whether it's 70, 80, or 100K plus. Then I can entertain another 60, 70, even 85% crash to sweep those lows and grab all of that liquidity. The 2017 cycle saw about an 84, almost 85% crash for Bitcoin from its high. And even from the 2013 highs, we can see Bitcoin also crashed here 87%. For this bear market that we've seen from Bitcoin's high, we've only crashed about 77%, so not even breaking 80% yet. And here's a post I did back in September, and this is another thing I'm watching. If we look at the previous 3 cycles, full bear markets and bull runs for the Bitcoin price chart on the weekly time frame, we can see brutal bear markets started to recover as soon as we closed a full weekly candle, so both the weekly candle body and the full wick, so there's no wicks even below the 50% Fibonacci retracement. We have always created a new all-time high price. So Bitcoin closed above the 50%, blasted through the remaining retracements, went above the 4.236, and then even as high as the 34 fib extension. In 2016, we saw the same thing, about an 85-87% crash, almost a double bottom. Started its retracement before the Bitcoin halving. As soon as we closed weekly candles above the 50%, we broke through these retracements and headed to an all-time high price, hitting the 2618, coming back up, candle bodies and wicks on the 4.236 and beyond. And here's the previous cycle. We got the crash retracement up to the 618. This is well before the halving. Did another big crash down to the 0.059, just like XRP did back when it crashed to 30 cents. Started climbing past the 50%, broke through retracements, and headed to an all-time high price. So we can see basically a double top, maybe a little bit above the 3618. So this reached the 34 fib extension early on. Then we reached at least the 4.236, arguably much higher up here. You can see the 8 extension. Last cycle, only the 3618. So across the board, we're seeing diminishing returns. I don't think Bitcoin creates a higher Fibonacci extension compared to last cycle. But I do think it's still within the realm of possibility for Bitcoin to hit some of these golden extensions, even if it's only this first one at the 127. And that 50% Fibonacci retracement level is right on 42,000. I know some people expect us to reject here or even a little bit higher above 40K, and it's possible. I really hope not. I'm hoping that we create an all-time high price. Because in previous videos we shared, even by length, from the high until another all-time high, it took over 1,000 days. Same thing for here, and then even here we're getting very close to that 1,000 day mark, and that happens in 2024. So history repeating is never guaranteed, but I am definitely hoping for a damn rhyme. And I've seen comments asking about my thoughts of a sub 10K Bitcoin or breaking this low of 15K, and all I know is it's possible, but in my opinion, I think it would make more sense after a much bigger rise, get a lot more liquidity, get more retail money into the market before another crash like that. Anything's possible. I would be shocked from here if we just did a massive crash and created another low. That would be like worst case for me. Maybe I'm way off, but I think it makes a lot more sense to get a lot more liquidity and a much bigger move to the upside before any type of huge cataclysmic crash. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully the audio is okay. Still recording on my laptop as I fix my PC, and I will catch you in the next one.